Welcome to this edition of the Tea Time. It's November 11th, right? And our tea time that transitioned from the physical to the virtual. It's nice to know that it's actually working. I know all of us have been up and about with Damaris holding the fort, but it feels so nice to be back here and seeing not only familiar faces, but also new faces, and that this is continuing to actually move. So I'm Jorem Awadu. I've moderated a couple of these sessions, before, and it's really interesting to be, moderating a session that really deals with a very, very pertinent issue, on the continent, but also, something that is global, in nature. So without maybe wasting a lot of time, I'll ask our panelists for the day to, maybe introduce themselves, and then we will take it on from there, depending on how, the panel has kind of prepared their presentation. The way it is usually is that you give a presentation, and then we'll follow up with questions, interject, at certain point. So again, let's have the introductions, then we kind of, take it up from there with your team, kind of taking us through the session.
Wonderful. All right. So Violet, do you want to introduce yourself, then Eva, and then I'll do myself as well.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be back home. My name is Violet Acumo, and I am the Associate Director of Leaders of Africa. Eva, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's so good to see familiar faces. I'm Eva Penar, and also I'm the Director for Research and Development.
And hello, everyone. Most of you know my face, or all of our faces, but I'm Peter Penar. I am the Director of Leaders of Africa in the Institute. And we'll also be joined, hopefully very shortly, by Dr. Jelili Adebiyi, who is presently at Michigan State and is the Associate Director of the Leaders of Africa Institute. So he'll be joining us very shortly. And so today we've got a presentation for you and a few special things, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about the Leaders of Africa Institute and its approach to what we're going to be calling impact education. But we also have some special guests here too, but I'm going to wait until that point in today's presentation to introduce them. And those are our scholars and fellows of the Leaders of Africa Institute. So we'll have an opportunity to engage with them and introduce them in the context of today's presentation. So thanks for joining us, and let's begin. So I'm going to share my screen here. So hopefully everyone will be able to see my screen. So just give it a moment. Sometimes it just takes a moment to pop up for you. All right. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. And one of the things that we like to encourage here at the Leaders of Africa Institute is for everyone to, ask questions, raise your hand, share your thoughts. We are monitoring the chat, so we may not get to your comments or your questions during our presentation or at certain points during our presentation. We'll be sure to address all those comments, questions, thoughts, ideas, things that are on your mind by putting them in the chat. And we're monitoring that in real time during today's presentation and throughout the session. So today's session, we're entitling The Leaders of Africa Institute and the Future of Impact Education. And I want to start by a few challenges. And I'm going to assume that a lot of these challenges are known to many of us here, because we are in that area. We study these things. We've thought about these things. Well, let me hash out a few of those for us as we get into today. And I want to start with the education and skills gap. This is a very important gap that we see. Gaps in opportunities in educational training in African countries that varies across countries, varies across regions within countries, but it is a general theme that we see. So on your screen, what you can see here, Google, as well as the World Bank, did a study asking people, how are you learning technical skills that you're using in the tech field, right? So where are you learning those skills? So you can see only about 33% said they learned those in the context of university. Majority of them are learning those skills or trying to upskill in other areas, suggesting that there's a significant skills gap, particularly in higher education. And we're very familiar with that. In addition to that, us at Leaders of Africa Institute believe that skills gap and the education gap is not just something that we see in the primary and secondary education area or in undergraduate education. We also see that in postgraduate education, as well as for mid-career professionals, as well as faculty, and as well established faculty and professionals. And we know that in our fields, in our research and in our impact work that we do, the tools that are required for our work, those technical skills, those data analytics skills that we need, are ever increasing, right? So there's always that potential for the skills gap that is present to in fact widen over time. And we're going to talk about how we talk about closing that skills gap across these different phases in one's life and one's career. In addition to the skills gap and the education gap we also see a research and publications gap. So we look at the percentage of GDP that is devoted to research. The top spending African country, as again, this is a percentage of the total size of the economy, not raw amount spent. That would be South Africa, and they're number 43 in the world, followed by Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, and Ethiopia. And you can see a trend here. So a number of North African countries have a lot more spending on research than other countries across the continent. But you can see it's comparatively low across the board. And if we compute that percentage of GDP to actual amount of money and resources to research and publications, we would see that that pales in comparison to what is being spent in other countries that are spending comparable percentages of their GDP. And this has led to a research publication gap that has closed over the last few years. So we do see a lot more publications coming from faculty members, young researchers, and researchers just generally speaking in African countries. So we see that publications gap close, which is encouraging, but we also know there are also issues surrounding quality and incentives surrounding publications, which we'll talk about. So that gap of research and publications still continues. In addition to that, despite some interventions in higher education to close the education and skills gap, to deal with the publications and research gap, we still see a societal impact gap. And we also see that here in the United States. We know that a lot of resources are devoted to higher educational institutions to study issues like economic inequality, issues of political import, but we still see that the United States, for instance, is one of the most unequal countries around the world. And it leads, and we see the similar thing in other countries across Africa. Remember, South Africa spends the most on research and is also one of the most highly unequal countries. And so it begins to make us think that is our research, is the work that we're doing, the impact and capacity building that we're doing, really translating into measurable impact on broader society metrics, such as in, for example, inequality here. We can also say the same thing about corruption as well. Despite, talking about issues of fighting corruption, of studying corruption, of doing things in our respective fields, in our research fields and our impact fields to tackle some of these challenges, these problems have still persisted, right? And are still present, and it goes without saying. Now, in thinking about these things, there are a number of things that have been tried, right? And there are a few things that are mentioned that have been tried. The first thing that has been tried is one-off capacity building, right? So perhaps we're going to address some of these concerns. We're going to create capacity building exercises that will deal with this. And one of the things we see is that many of these exercises are one-off capacity building exercises. They focus on the numbers, right? How many scholars, for example, are being trained in a program? We trained 1,000 scholars, 2,000 people. Google wants to train 100,000 people, right? So there's a focus on these one-off opportunities and a focus on what we call the numbers. In addition to that, a lot of the efforts have been focused on one country or focused on one disciplinary area, right? And we've all contributed in those areas, right? In my field of political science, Eva is international development, Ghana and Jelili is involved in sort of community sustainability. We've all been part of those sort of single country disciplinary specific opportunities, right? But some of the problems I referenced are quite multidisciplinary in focus, right? And also we see in dealing with some of these gaps, technically focused collaborations that we see. So they're focused on really technical issues, right? They're not perhaps contemplating broader societal issues that we're going to be talking about that Leaders of Africa comments on. And then finally, the last two things we can emphasize is a lot of these opportunities are emphasizing youth only, right? So you see it's quite popular to say we're doing a program with the youth. We're doing this with the youth. We have a youth outreach program. And we're not here to say that the youth aren't important. They are the future, and they are a large segment of up and coming people. But how about that process that I showed you before, moving from primary, secondary education, university, to post-secondary and beyond, right? The skills gap, the research gap, the impact gap has to be closed at all phases. And as you're going to see, Leaders of Africa Institute is not only about the youth, but about that progress throughout one's career. So we're going to talk about that. And lastly, we oftentimes see in these solutions that it's very much focused on Western academics who have been doing work in a given context and focused on sort of Western models of how research is funded, how impact organizations and work is done, capacity building is done. So we see these as good efforts, right? They're moving the needle in some respect, but they're not doing enough. And so Leaders of Africa grows out of some of these challenges and some of the things that we see. So let's turn to some of the possible sort of what we're doing here. And then we're going to pass it off to Violet to talk about the Institute. So we're creating what we call a model that moves from capacity building to impact education. One that transcends country boundaries, right? As you're going to see here, Leaders of Africa Institute is not Leaders of Africa Institute Ghana, Leaders of Africa Institute Tanzania, right? It is Leaders of Africa. It is a Pan-African organization. Number two, it's multidisciplinary. We have scholars who are going to speak today who come from a variety of different disciplines: higher education, economic development, public finance. For instance, we're all dealing with similar challenges from different angles, different perspectives. We all have to come together. So we're going to talk about that. And then, as I've alluded to, age, right? We're not just focused on the youth, but a broader, trajectory of closing the skills gap. Other areas that we focus on, we're going to talk about here in particular detail, is offering a supportive, collegial, and collaborative environment. One of the things that we emphasize here at the Leaders of Africa, we don't use our titles. A lot of us are doctors or aspiring professors. We do not use those titles. We believe in this sense of camaraderie, of collegial, supportive, collaborative community. We do things differently, right? And we're going to talk about what that looks like. We also provide a space for critical and creative engagement, because one of the things that you're going to see here is that Leaders of Africa is unafraid of commenting on some sensitive political and economic issues. And many organizations like to stay away from these issues, right? They want to not rock the boat. They have certain partners or certain governments that they may be working with. Leaders of Africa pursues this in a different way, and we're going to talk about that. And then finally, talking about supporting sustainable engagement and buttressing what we're going to talk about is sort of moral teaching and sacrifice. So we are also going to be talking about how we include values in our unique approach. So I'm going to hand it over to Violet, who's going to talk a little bit more about the philosophy and particular approach to some of these problems that the Leaders of Africa Institute has. So over to you, Violet.
Thank you, Peter. So at Leaders of Africa, we mobilize the power of rigorous inquiry and creative expression to advance equity, justice, and leadership in Africa. And we do this by facilitating a supportive Pan-African community, which then together cultivates meaningful, impactful, and translatable research. Most times when research is generated in institutions of higher education, it tends to remain locked within a community of experts and scholars. However, Leaders of Africa makes research more accessible to non-experts and lay people. And we do this by harnessing the power of audiovisual, graphic, and technological design. So for instance, where research may not be accessible through print media, we can make it accessible through creative audiovisual mechanisms that transcend national and technical boundaries by harnessing the power of technology through the creative tools that we use and also teach, where we take research and translate it into impact, which relates to what we call connected impact education. And next slide, please. And we do this through the Leaders of Africa approach, which involves a 4-step process, which begins with inquiry. So this inquiry begins with research, but it does not end there. Rather, it's a project-based creation that broadens out to the conception of holistic and innovative designs, which, as I mentioned earlier, include audiovisual and technological designs aimed at engaging with audiences through creative translation. In the Leaders of Africa approach, creative translation involves the use of non-traditional means to disseminate research findings in ways that make them noteworthy, meaningful and valuable to policymakers, nonprofit and government career persons, scholars, and fellows. And the final step in the Leaders of Africa approach is the impact stage. So here we model impact creation and measure that impact. And how we do that is through our project-based model, which ensures time-bound and measurable projects by our scholars. And these projects are typically close to their hearts and have direct, tangible community impact. And we do this through the Leaders of Africa approach. The Leaders of Africa's 4-step approach that I was talking about earlier manifests itself through our research methods, data and design for development, podcast and multimedia creation, and public policy programs. And through this, we democratize learning, we build community, we provide creative content and events, and develop curriculum and creative impact. And we are going to touch on all of these things that I have mentioned a little bit later. And underlying all of our work at Leaders of Africa is a commitment to values. And as you can see, we have our pledge and honor code on the screen. And values our scholars, fellows, and partners adhere to and are enshrined in all the work that we do. Some of the work we are about to share with you today. And we at Leaders of Africa are governed by the moral good we do with knowledge. We not only call upon people to be critical of others' moral failings, but even beyond that, we are critical and reflective of ourselves as well.
So in building on this, when we're going to talk about the programs here, we have scholars and fellows from 15 different African countries over the past 3 years. That's over 150 Institute scholars to date, informing major programs. And Violet has mentioned those: the Research Methods Program, the Data and Design for Development Program, the Public Policy Program, and the Podcast Program, which is now the Multimedia Creation Program. And you can see on your screen some of the images from our teaching over the last 3 years in these programs. And we're going to talk specifically about one of these programs in particular. And I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Jelili Ghana, who's going to talk about the flagship program, which is the Research Methods Program. Ghana, can you hear us? All right. I think, Ghana, we're unable to hear you or see you at this point. So hopefully you'll be able to connect in just a moment, maybe step back out and back in. Okay. All right. So let me just jump into this a little bit and hopefully. Okay. Hopefully Ghana will be able to join us in just a moment. Seems like there's an internet issue. So let me talk a little bit about the Research Methods Program. It's the flagship program of the research of the Leaders of Africa Institute. And it began in 2019. So recruitment began in 2018. And this program is a full service research methods program that includes, as we talked about, moving through that process between creating research on the one hand, moving that research into a creation phase, and then moving it into creating impact projects. So let's take a look at sort of the flow of the research methods program. And this is what the research methods program looks like, because some of us have different ideas. When we say program, we may say, oh, is that a 1-week workshop? Is that a 2-week workshop? Is that a month-long workshop? Something of this nature. The Research Methods Program is actually a year-long program. It begins in May and June with the Research Design course, which talks about fundamental aspects of designing impactful research, research that can be taken from doing research to actually building on that in programmatic ways. Then it moves into a second course that we're focused on, which is survey design. And under survey design, we're really talking broadly about fieldwork methods. And we know that surveys are quite popular for a research method for sort of engagement with communities, but we also do work in sort of fieldwork methods as well. And then we transition to advanced quantitative methods. And those methods include coding in some of the popular platforms that we're familiar with, such as R, Python, as well as other sort of platforms. Ghana, do you want to take it from there? I see that you're back.
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter, for taking over. So just like Peter was mentioning, we make use of the state-of-the-art research method approaches that are well suited to fill in the capacity gap needed on the continent of Africa. And in our translation of the capacity gap, for the development of the research method program. We took into cognizance the various capacity needs at the policy level arena in various countries and various sectors on the continent. We also consider the educational deficit gaps that Peter alluded to at the beginning of the presentation. It was all of these reading combined together, coupled with what we call the systemic approach to innovative program design that we use in making decisions about what is relevant in a collegial way with those that we are delivering our services for the continent. As a result of this, we design our research method classes in a way that the students and the scholars generally and the policymakers and different stakeholders that are enrolled in the program are not only exposed to how to do research, but more importantly, doing research in a way to find solutions to various development challenges affecting various communities on the continent. And in doing this, we took into account what they also need to be able to create jobs for themselves and to drive the economy of their communities, the economy of their various countries, and the economy of the continent as a whole. It was as a result of this that we deem it necessary to build their capacity in the area of qualitative research method, in the area of quantitative research method, and how to do mixed research method, and building their capacity awareness to leverage various assisting analytical tools, just as how to inform the process of making data to speak to development challenges. All of these things are doing it in a way that it meets with the various educational offerings in most universities in the United States. Through the research method program, that is a 6-month-long intensive training, coupled with one-on-one mentoring program, we've been able to build capacities that are serving various governmental and non-governmental entities and individuals on the country. And as you can see on the slide, the research method program covers issues related to research design, survey method cost, and advanced quantitative methods that Peter was explaining when I took over from him. And we also have in place from the period of October through April, individualized and customized professional capacity building workshop that are also related to building capacity in using research to find solutions to problems, and at the same time equipping them with the basic data analytic competencies so required for them to match up and compete favorably with their colleagues in different parts of the world. And at the end of the day, there are basic expectations that translate to addressing, building the capacity to addressing development challenges on the continent. Part of that is once they've gone through the process successfully, they are issued what we call a research completion certification that shows that they've gone through the program, and part of that requires them to be able to do research that are publishable and that can inform the process of addressing policy and developmental problems in their various areas of interest. And currently, we have some of our colleagues of our scholars that are working on the issues related to food security. We have those that are working on issues related to addressing environmental problems in their various communities, and et cetera, et cetera. And at the end of the day, we have a process of showcasing the voices of our scholars and all of those that are involved in our program through various activities and platforms that we have created through our various engagements.
And as you can see on your screen, some of the scholars are joining from across the continent here, from Somalia, Uganda, and Kenya. We have scholars that are going to speak in a moment. And just as Ghana has just pointed out, right, that it's about foundational use of empirical research, empirical data to help inform some of the solutions that are there. And we want to emphasize here at this point that it's not just about the research, but it's about translating that research. It's about creating the projects that grow out of that. So one of the things that you notice there is that at the end of the research methods program, you actually have to craft a project and a big idea, a big project in your community, in your field, that is going to engage a broader set of stakeholders, and it's going to have measurable impact, right? To ensure that you're not just worried about the publication, although we do care about that and we do see our scholars publish, but we also see that manifests itself in tangible ways. And you can see some of the early processes here from our present 2001 research method scholars Who you see on the screen here is Eric Yakum. He's from Ghana. He's actually studying aging in Ghana. So I mentioned how we always focus on the youth, but at some point we're going to be really focusing on the aging population and what support they have. So his research is really looking at those social safety net structures there. And in this case, he's conducting a meeting as well as a focus group with those in the community. And we also see a photo here from Dr. Eda Mercy Aki, who's joining us now today, actually, and we'll just speak in just a moment, from Cameroon, who's doing a focus group with students about their aspirations and about admissions policies at the University of Buea, which is Cameroon's #1 English-speaking university. So I want to move from us sort of talking about these things in the abstract to kind of hearing from our scholars and their experiences. So I want to now introduce 3 guests, but I'm going to introduce them one after another. And I want to first of all thank them for joining us, because it is really late where everyone is joining us from. So Dr. Eda Mercy Aki is joining us from Cameroon, which we began at 10 p.m. We're nearing 11 p.m. Local time right now, just throwing that out there. But she is joining us today from Cameroon. She is actually the Vice Dean for Studies and Student Affairs in the Department of Education. And I should point out that she was accepted into the Research Methods program last year. And during her time in the Research Methods program, she was appointed as a Vice Dean in the Education Department. So we're really proud of that accomplishment of Dr. Eda. And so, Dr. Eda, I see that you're here with us today. I know that there have been some lighting and outage issues, so you may not use your camera today. That's perfectly fine. But do you want to share a little bit about yourself, your research, and sort of the way you see the Institute from your perspective? You may go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. In my opinion, I think that I've not acquired anything short of what Leaders of Africa had aimed or has as intended outcomes for its students. I am a scholar.
Yes, my name is Jorem, and I ordered some toner through.
You may go ahead, Eda. Sorry, I'm going to watch the muting. Go ahead, Eda.
Okay, so I'm currently a scholar in the Research Methods program, as well as the Data plus Design for Development program. And I think that I've been able to learn a lot, but specifically for me, it has been about the skills, the hands-on skills that I've acquired using and exposure to the use of several tools in research that has really stood out for me. In fact, I've taken this already when Peter was talking about impact. I was just thinking about some of the impact I've created already in my community using some of the exposures that they brought to me through the use of research tools. Tools such as Canvas, Kobo Toolbox, Arrow, and so on and so forth, driving from creation of the research to analysis and also running surveys and all of that. And another thing that really stands out for me is the instructional method or approach that is being used in Leaders of Africa that has truly impacted on my professional development. And I think, in my opinion, that they are very pragmatic, they are very practical, and they bring to life the meaning of student-centered learning, putting the needs of students at the center of the teaching and learning process. Because during our sessions that come up every Sunday, and during our workshops as well, and even our one-to-one mentorship, there is always a lot of engagement, allowing the student to participate fully by answering questions, by sharing. Sometimes we even start our classes by understanding what the current happenings. You know, sometimes the instructors are talking about football and I'm wondering, what are they talking about? And before you know it, they've connected it to some data visualization tool or some way to be able to present. And for me, that has been very, very realistic. And I'm trying to adapt that method of teaching in my classroom to really allow the learner get involved, get engaged in the teaching and learning process. And This is why in my research, I'm interested in understanding students' aspirations and seeing how admission policies take into consideration these aspirations. Aspirations basically are the plans that students have about their educational plans. And I'm trying to see how admission policies take into consideration these plans of students. And so far, starting with my research methods 2021 program, I've been able to do a scoping study where I was able to do a focus group discussion with students, particularly who were admitted into programs that they did not aspire for, programs they did not apply for. But because of the need to continue schooling and also because of the need of the university to amass its numbers, these students accepted some of these programs and they are engaged in, and I'm interested in seeing what are some of the psychological effects that getting involved in programs that you did not aspire for. What are some of the psychological effects on learning and how is it even affecting the academic performance and so on. And with the data visualization class, I'm extending this to try to see how education impacts development generally through some of the through taking into consideration the student, the needs of the student, and the centralizing the student in the learning process. So I'm doing all of these, and presently preparing my survey to go out through Qualtrics. I've tried Kobo Toolbox, but we're thinking about taking the survey to Qualtrics, and we aim to expand it to all the students in Cameroon, and in the future even expand beyond the frontiers of Cameroon to Africa to try to understand some of the students who aspired for certain programs at the time of admission and were not admitted into their preferred programs. How is this decision of the admission board affecting their learning? I think
wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Dr. Eda. We're going to come back to Dr. Eda's project a little bit more that she alluded to here, this massive survey that's going to take place, and how we're going to build even technologies to think about mentoring students who are considering different careers in Cameroon. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that at the very end of the presentation. I also want to introduce today, joining us from Ghana, so slightly better time zone, but still quite late. And that would be Isaac Newton-Borte, who's joining us today. He's a development practitioner working in government, actually, in the public finance sector in Ghana. And you can see here a poster from a presentation that Isaac Borte gave on a paper that he actually published through the Afrobarometer. And some of us may be familiar with the Afrobarometer because it is actually housed in part or in partnership with Michigan State University. His paper was selected and was published as part of the Afrobarometer series. So I want to invite Isaac to share a bit. Isaac, can you hear us? Are you able to share?
Hello, Peter. I can hear you.
All right, good. We can hear you too.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, as Peter said, I am Isaac Newton-Borte from Ghana. I'm a development practitioner working in the public sector of Ghana as well. Well, I would say that for me, the Leaders of Africa provides one with the opportunity to learn new things in the world. I was part of the 2020 cohort of the Research Methods Program, and I must say that it was through this program that I learned new skills like the use of R programming in quantitative analysis. And it has been very useful to me in some of the things that I do nowadays. Currently, I'm also part of the Data Development Dashboard program, where I've gained new skills in the use of Tableau, Data Wrapper, and then more interestingly, Power BI, which is currently being used in business intelligence analysis. So for me, looking at these two programs that I've taken so far, I have realized that, or what I have gained so much, is that the Leaders of Africa Institute gives us the opportunity to be in line with the global world and makes us competitive. For some of us who have left the classroom for some time now, whenever we take programs at the Institute, it gives us new knowledge of what is happening in town and how we can do things differently at our workplaces. And this, for me, is a very big plus to the work that the Institute is doing. Because if not for Institute, certain skills that I just mentioned, like the use of R programming, the use of Microsoft Power BI may not be available to some of us. Also at the Institute, it's open, and as Peter rightly said from the beginning, it's multidisciplinary. So it doesn't really matter where your interest is. The Institute has room for you and gives you the opportunity to develop your skills. At least, as Peter said, out of the Research Methods program, I was able to come up with a paper which was very, very interesting and became a topical issue in Ghana, discussing taxation in the Ghanaian context. So for me, these are some of the things that the Institute does and makes it stand out. Once you join the program, you get the opportunity to also network with other scholars who may have similar research interests. And you also get the opportunity to learn from them, new things that they're doing. And I must say that in our current data dashboard program, there are people who are very skilled in the use of these softwares already. And this has helped some of us to also pick a few things from them and we are applying to our work. These are some of the work that the Institute is doing, and I think it's great. And the Institute should continue to expand and give us more programs. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Isaac. And we're going to talk a little bit about that program. We're going to take a look at those dashboards that people are mentioning, this use of data and translating data in ways that can be quite impactful in just a moment. So I'm glad you raised that, Isaac. So we have, lastly, one more presenter. You can notice that our presenters are from Central and West Africa today because the time zone is even later in East Africa. We haven't invited those who are so far where it's in the middle of the night here, but we do have Roland, who's next door in Cote d'Ivoire, to share a little bit more about his work. And he's right now a monitoring and evaluation officer at the National Council for Nutrition, Feeding, and Early Childhood Development under the National Information Platform for Nutrition. And so this is a special task force that was set up in the government of Cote d'Ivoire to deal with issues of food security, broadly speaking, but also nutrition issues in the country. So that's his area of interest. And I see, Roland, are you here? I do see that you are here. Do you want to share?
Yes, thank you so much, Peter. Hello, everyone. As Peter said, I'm joining from Cote d'Ivoire, West Africa. And my research is about impact of promotion action of nutrition on food security in rural area in Cote d'Ivoire. And this research is based on a project called Multi-Sectoral Project for Nutrition and Early Childhood Development. It is a pilot project that is implemented in 14 regions out of 33 in rural area. And between its components, there is one related to food security for mothers and children under 5 and pregnant women. So as a pilot project, it is very important to identify the best practices and the effective ones that can be duplicated to improve food security of vulnerable populations. It involves the identification of strategies employed to promote nutrition and food security, and to whom are these actions targeted. About my experience at the research at the Leaders of Africa Institute. So I can talk about a lot of fields of research improvement. The first one is about design, research design, with ethical consideration, data protection, confidence, and privacy. And the next one is about methodology. So we went deep with methodologies like qualitative and quantitative methodology. Also, how to use mixed methods for better results. And another part that is very important is critical literature review to find the best approach to carry out our own research. And this is supported with case studies, that is very important, and a strong mentorship, as Peter said before. The next step is about data collection with use of computer-assisted personal interviewing with tools like Kobo Collect tools and so on. The next part is about transparency in data analysis. And this involves use of coding tools like R that can help to check the work you are doing and also duplicate it for another research. That is very important for shared experience. And the next one is about communication, about research. And if you have some research that are not well known, it's not very useful to impact really people's life. So I can notice a strong communication skill and tool used by the institute. And the first level is about the internal communication with platform to help scholars discuss with professors and with their teammates to improve each other work. And the next step of communication, external communication with blog posts on Notion, podcast, events like the one we're attending now, and news on social media. And the other part I like a lot is about the dynamic visualization tools with use of Tableau, Power BI, Data Wrapper, and Flourish to engage decision makers. And the last part I can mention is about my personal improvement of my English level, because I come from a French-speaking country, and taking part to these different courses helped me a lot to improve my English, the reading, the speaking, the writing, and the listening. And it helped me to improve my score at the TOEFL test. So I also like to thank again the Institute for this opportunity, also to share with you today. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Roland, for sharing. And I should say, perhaps we should try and speak French more often, because I also need to work on my French, as it's been a while since I've been in Côte d'Ivoire. But lovely. Thanks for sharing, Roland. So I think one of the key things that we want to emphasize right now, before we share a few last areas of impact of Leaders of Africa, is that, you know, these tools that we're learning are quite important, right? And we need to know how to use them. But, you know, these days, a lot of people on social media, they're talking a lot about, I want to gain knowledge and tools, but it's also about how we use those tools and what we're using them for, right? And so Roland mentioned a lot of different, you know, platforms that Leaders of Africa uses to do digital education, to do digital engagement in unique ways. And Dr. Eda also mentioned that as well. So it's not just about the tools and learning how to use them and applying them, but also making them, leverage them to have that impact. So let's talk about just a couple of areas that we have. And you can see the first category here, democratizing learning, is our big area. But these last ones we're going to briefly go through, because we want to make sure that there's time for discussions, questions, and alike. And as our scholars have just shared here, these programs that deal with individual scholars or individual fellows, we're also engaging with institutions. So Ghana, do you want to talk a little bit about that? I think that builds on what we've just been speaking about.
Yeah, so as in furtherance of our resolve to contribute to addressing the development challenges on the continent of Africa, when at the onset of the outbreak of COVID-19, we consider it reasonable that we support our colleagues in the academia in various countries in Africa, because the transition to online learning means that there was a need for capacity to be built in order to sustain, in order to make the process effective and seamless as much as we could. We were one of the first set of individuals to offer free training for faculty members in various universities on the continent of Africa, teaching them how to teach effectively well online. Because as the Leaders of Africa, that was something we've been doing before the outbreak of COVID-19. And we have developed systematic programs incubated to address this gap, particularly in Africa. And we had plans of trying to train faculty members before the outbreak of COVID-19. Interestingly, COVID-19 broke out, and we were able to implement our plan as fast as possible. And a good number of the faculty members who attended the program mentioned that similar programs that they've attended in the past couldn't produce the desired result. Because of the innovative approach that our program was predicated upon, it was rated as one of the most successful training programs offered to faculty members to bridge this gap. And majority of them went back to incubate the same training, thereby training more people that became much more capacitated to fill in the gap that was created by COVID-19. And we are really proud of this, particularly one of the universities that benefited from this is my alma mater in Nigeria, the University of Lagos. And up until now, those that participated in the program, they have continued to replicate the training for their fellow faculty members and in other universities in Nigeria. And this is telling how we've been creating impact that are beginning to magnify and replicate themselves in various places on the continent.
So absolutely. So we're also, as you can see, engaging in e-learning. And so hopefully you picked up on that with these programs that are bringing people from different contexts. We're using these programs much before the pandemic had begun. And I think that point is made. So that's also a piece of this as well. Let's talk about these other areas that sort of complement the training that's there, because there's a broader sort of environment that we create here at Leaders of Africa to surrounding sort of inquiry and creative expression in impact making. So let's talk about some of those areas. So Eva, over to you.
Yeah, so as part of some of the things that scholars have shared, we also have a platform called Discord, where we use to continue the conversation, the day-to-day conversation that comes up in our society and also in government. So we use Discord especially to engage most of the scholars. Most of the time we put a topic there that what do you think about it, and different people and different some of the scholars, not just the scholars, we also have people that are not part of Leaders of Africa that have joined our Discord community that use this to talk about broader societal issues and also come out with solutions and how we can help to resolve that. And this has been an important platform where most scholars are using it to network and also share their research ideas and different perspectives on different issues that are taking place around the world.
And as was alluded to in the comments by our scholars who joined us today, this is also a platform where they share what they're doing in their research and their work and their impact programs that are there. So there's a sharing ability there, voice, a video chat, as well as text sharing. So it's a very sort of dynamic community we create. So we're all about creating that community and that social learning that undergirds these efforts. We're also involved in creative content and events as well. Eva, talk us through that.
Yeah, so we all know about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So when the initiative started, we started talking around it to bring awareness of the Continental Free Trade to not just the audience in Africa, but also in the diaspora. So we had like about 3 days events, like 3 different events in different weeks, where we brought in experts both from the public sector and the private sector, and also some consultants to talk about what they understand about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and also the impact on the continent. In addition to that, we've also had different numbers of events. We also did an event looking at the disruption that COVID-19 has brought in higher education and how faculties and also universities can take advantage of this to build their e-learning platform to enhance learning and teaching. So these are just the few things that we've done that we are sharing here. Is also a way for the scholars to be able to connect some of the research they are doing with what is taking place outside by listening to some of these experts and also listen to their perspective. And it's also been a way for our scholars to also network with some of these experts in the various fields and also know what they are doing and also follow them and also read some of their research and apply to their work that they are doing themselves.
Yeah, and you can see these are 2 recent events that we've done at the Leaders of Africa. So one of the things that you will notice about it is that we don't just sort of record your average Zoom meeting when we have our events. We like to have that professional piece to it, that engagement piece, so that these conversations, they live after we have these conversations. As part of our institute, we have these technical tools, these multimedia tools that we use to produce these events. And so what you can see here is an event that Ghana moderated. This was just a couple weeks ago on the issue of food security and organic farming, because we have a lot of scholars who are focusing on issues of food security. On the bottom one, you can see an event from actually last year. And this was a really big event looking at sort of public policy when it comes to Nigeria and what we could say is the Almansaransi. And I don't want to go into depth about that here. It would take us some time to talk about it. I can see you smiling, Ghana, but it's a real public policy concern and issue for those that are activists, those who are engaging, particularly in sort of civil society in northern Nigeria. So we brought together parliamentary people who are in government, as well as civil society leaders, as well as academics, to come and talk about this issue, because we have a number of scholars who are focusing on that issue. And so that, again, again, as Eva said, these are an opportunity to hear from experts, but also to network, because we see ourselves also as, in a sense, doing the public relations that some of our scholars need to get their voices heard, to have that platform to amplify their voices and achieve those opportunities. And again, a lot of programs you see that just focus on big numbers, the 1,000, 2,000 people trained, they're not focusing on making sure those people have exposures and the connections they need to do their work. And we also see that in entrepreneurship. We see people giving out $2,000 here and saying, try to do something, but we're more than that. We want to connect people to those opportunities here. And in addition to that, we also have podcasts, which Eda mentioned here. And you can see here the two main ones we produce in-house. One is called This Week, which focuses on Africa in the news. So if you're interested in sort of conversations about news and sort of culture, politics, economics, this is our podcast where the core team member gets together every 2 weeks and discusses what is going on, right? And relating that to some research and impact themes that we have at the Leaders of Africa Institute. We also have a podcast that more showcases what we do at the Institute and Leaders of Africa and the impact. So that features scholars as well as change makers. And that podcast is called Inside Leaders of Africa. In addition to that, as I mentioned before, we also have a multimedia program, and that one is producing original content from those who are based on the African continent on a variety of different subjects, such as I'll point to one here, Teach for Tomorrow. This is done by somebody who's in the education field in Uganda, who's bringing out stories of educational training in Uganda and what that looks like and what the impact of a teacher can be in the lives of students, right? So we're creating this original content as one way in which we're translating these things for broader audiences. And I can see that Peshalano Ali here, also an alum of MSU, has joined us today. Peshalano was absolutely fundamental and key to our first podcast masterclass that we taught, in which these podcasts have evolved and come out of. And if you're interested in learning or listening to any of these, just reach out to us. We'll be able to share some links. So as we come to a conclusion here, just a few more last sort of thoughts about our impact and what that looks like. We also have this innovative curriculum that was sort of come out in this session. Eva, you want to talk a little bit about that and this data dashboard things that everyone has been mentioning?
So most of the scholars are talking about how they are translating their research into like visualization for easy communication and apprehension for others. So this is one of the data visualization that was created by one of the scholars who's looking at how much does agriculture contribute to GDP in Kenya. And this is like the data, and it's looking at a trend from I think 2010 to 2019. So these are some of the ways as they're doing the research, they're also making it easy for other people to access the information in a simple and a graphical way that is easy for understanding and also for impact decision making.
Absolutely. And in addition to that, where again, as we've alluded to today, it's all about taking that research, those tools, that knowledge, and making an impact. And I want to sort of highlight Dr. Eda's project that she mentioned before, the Higher Education Aspirations Project. And I know some of us are familiar with the fact that we have maybe 3 choices when we apply to university and we don't get any of those choices. What happens, right? She's studying what that looks like, the meaning of that, and what we can do to really solve some of those concerns, right? And they're serious concerns that are not just about Cameroon, but they're also echoed in other contexts. So if we went around the room today, we'd probably say, oh, I've had a friend that have been in that situation, right? I'm betting that would be the case. So her project is beginning with a countrywide survey that she's fielding on Leaders of Africa's platform that will be open actually beginning next week. And then she's going to be giving bi-weekly updates on her research. So how is the research coming? Who's filling out the survey? Because one of the things that we emphasize at the Institute here is transparency around research. And I think Isaac mentioned that and Roland mentioned that as well, sort of the issue of transparency. We want to conduct research in a way that's going to lead to social impact by doing it transparently. So as Eda is going to be doing her work, one of the cool things you're going to be able to see is what are the basic demographics of the survey respondents in real time in a data dashboard. And it's going to be able to facilitate a broader sample and also a national conversation about these issues in admissions policy in Cameroon. And this is what we call Leaders of Africa IRL, or research in real life, right? So we're watching research actually how it transpires, as opposed to the researcher goes off, does a survey, and then presents finding. So we're showing that, and Etta will be sharing that. In addition to that, next year, her project is going to be involving designing an application that's going to help steer students to make choices about their career and align them to the skills and things that they need to do when they apply to schools, university level, and when they get to university, what they should be doing to make sure that they're able to succeed in that field. And she is going to be designing a platform which she's, as part of this survey, is asking students, what are they looking for in that platform? So this is that project-oriented piece of this research that sometimes, as those of us who do research, that we forget, right? We think about publications being the motivation for what we're doing. But what we believe at the Leaders of Africa, it's much more. And so we are going to invite you to watch her research as it transpires. Now, as we conclude here, you're probably wondering, there are a lot of things that Leaders of Africa Institute is doing, and this model is quite complex in how we're applying it here. So you're probably thinking, how much resources do these folks have to conduct all this work? So I'm going to leave it to Violet to talk a little bit about that, because I'm sure many of you are curious about that.
So as we all here probably know, organizations, researchers, and impact designers are often riddled with limited and inconsistent funding. However, the needs of these organizations and individuals are much larger and consistent. Now, we at Leaders of Africa are a sustainable organization that has built a model that has been able to be solely sustained by incoming revenue. We believe in accessibility by making our programs accessible to all qualified scholars across the continent and even in the diaspora, and also through scholarships. And we're also an organization that believes in building on strengths and removing waste by focusing on our strengths. So over time, we have built networks, high-level curricula, technological platforms, and produced professional media, like some of which Peter has shown you, all in-house. And hitherto, we have embargoed external funding to build internal strengths. And while resources may be a problem, we at Leaders of Africa have shown that resource constraints do not preclude you from making meaningful leaps and progress. And for partnerships, we prioritize partnerships not focused on who has funding, but rather on who drives the agenda. So prioritizing our values over receiving funding over the past 2 years has enabled Leaders of Africa to develop and sustain a solid identity driven by clear values, as we have clearly and consistently shown through our presentation. And to that end, we have maintained our autonomy, and we're happy to say, and I'm actually proud to say, that unlike organizations that exist simply because funding exists, we exist for a much higher purpose which transcends just that. And to that end, we have been able to accomplish so much with very little. And going into the future, we remain committed to mindful resource utilization, unlike spending grant money simply because it's available to be spent, because at Leaders of Africa, we believe that a little goes a long way. And so, Peter, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what that future may look like?
Yeah, so as we conclude today, and we're really looking forward to your comments and questions, just a little bit into the window into the future. So we've been working on Leaders of Africa Institute now for about 3 years. And one of the long-term goals, and this is our long-term goals, is establishment of a university that's quite unique and different from the traditional universities that we see, even here in the United States. One that's based on project-based learning and impact design, one that takes us through the research process, the skills gaining process, and aims it towards solving these challenges. A lot of universities and organizations talk about that, right? And as I said at the beginning of our presentation, all the talk has not necessarily led to significant impact. So there is a gap here. And we want to make sure that our institution, as it takes on a more physical form, is impactful and pursues curriculum in a new way. The second thing is we're looking to be a resource and a partner for impact education, research, translation of data, and carrying out impact projects, what we call sort of disruptive development, right? Disruptive because we're changing the way in which we think about development in a way that we do things better and differently, right? And so we are working with, and I alluded to this earlier, we're going to be collaborating on a number of different conferences as well as projects in the coming months that are going to sort of further our reach and some of the core things that we're doing. And the last thing is we want to make sure that we're doing things in the context of our moral values, that pledge that Violet mentioned earlier. This is really important to us. And even in the United States, our universities talk a little bit about ethics, right? But sometimes they're a little bit resident to say exactly what they believe on certain things, right? And for fear of alienating a lot of people, right? Because sometimes when we share our values, when we talk about, actually pursuing our values in practice, then we sometimes alienate people. And our argument at the Leaders of Africa Institute is that we want people who are of like-minded, not like-minded in terms of the approach that they take to solving the issues, but a clear and keen interest and knowledge of those issues and knowing that they want to solve them in one way or the other, right? That's the key thing for us as educators and as part of Leaders of Africa. And so as we close and we go into sort of questions and discussion, we just want to encourage you to, work with us. Help us transform education in pursuit of impact, right? There are a lot of ways that we've alluded to in this presentation, including being involved as a mentor as part of the Institute, or teaching in one of our programs if you happen to have some time, or collaboration on projects, right? Those are some sort of big ways in which one could get involved in Leaders of Africa and the Leaders of Africa Institute. Or I guess you could say, you can also join our mailing list. I'll make sure to put that in the chat. So if you go to leadersofafrica.org, that's our main website. You will see everything about Leaders of Africa there. If you go to leadersofafrica.org/connect with us, that's where you can share a little bit about yourself and sign up for a mailing list, or also show that you're interested in getting involved in some way. So that's a little bit about us. So I now pass it over to our moderator today, Jorem. So over to you, Jorem.
Very, very interesting presentation you guys had actually today. And I think we have lots of questions. But first of all, I want to, commend you guys for the coordination, the presentation generally as it went. And I know you guys might have touched this, but are you saying currently do the scholars pay anything as a way to actually facilitate their learning? Do they pay anything in fees?
Can you say that again, Joe? I'm sorry, cut out there for just a moment.
Is there a cost? Is there a cost for the, sorry, it's raining out here. Hopefully I don't have a lot of interference, but I'm saying, is there a cost to the scholar?
There is a very minimal cost for most programs. There's a very minimal cost, right? So the programs that Leaders of Africa does are valued at what we generally would see at a US-based institution. So think about a year-long program. It's $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, right? So let's benchmark that. All of our scholars who get into our program, and their competitive application process to get in to some of the programs. So they're all tailored in different ways. But that amount may be $50 US, $25 US, $100 US, something in that ballpark thereabouts. And of course, we also have sort of needs support that is given there. So that's the way we like to do it. And we think that this is a really good approach because it also promotes buy-in from those that are involved in a sustainable model, right? And again, as Violet mentioned, a lot of organizations, universities, they are begging to funders all the time, right? And they're pursuing that, and that's good. We appreciate those partnerships. We also have to show that we're sustainable and we're doing things differently, not to make it inaccessible, but also to just make sure that we're able to cover everything right in-house, right? Because as organizations see, you never know when things get bad, right? And you want to make sure that you're in existence for a long period of time. And we know in the higher education sector that a lot of private institutions just simply go by the wayside when things get bad. And so we are also experimenting with a model that is going to be sustainable for the long term. So very, very minimal fees to no fees, depending on the program.
Okay, wonderful. That didn't come out a little clearly, so I just wanted to follow up on that before I kind of follow up with ETA. ETA has a very, very interesting, I mean, all the presenters have interesting, but I just pick this one because I know, other people in attendance today will probably have questions. If they don't, then I'll still come back to this. But I really, looking at the visuals, looking at all the skills that the trainees are amassing, it's really, really, really something that I admire and like and commend you guys for continuing to do. And ETA touches Dr. ETA touches a very important area. In my preparation for this today, it was one of the things I was actually thinking about, just like, how do you model an education or a training that is really going to serve the needs of the people? And I do believe this talk has been going on over and over. One of the really big questions that I've seen in the literature, out there, and also probably participated in kind of evaluating aptitude or vocational kind of abilities in persons' disabilities, and all of that. You really do see that lots of people, professionals, are walking around, but most of them feel like, oh, probably I should have done another thing. We do know that career is something that doesn't end. People go, changing here and there. But that this board, that usually the admission board that decides for people, especially in these universities, that you don't qualify for the first aspiration, you're then going to go for the second, all of this. And I'm just like, I'm really waiting to hear more from Mercy as the results come in. I saw her with the interviews, and I was kind of, not to preempt anything. I just wanted, to kind of ask her, how do you then come up with this? Like, how did this become an area of interest to you currently during this training? Do you find that it's a big issue also within your setup in Cameroon? And then could you tell us, is your process probably the same as that we would see in most African setups, that you get once you get to the advanced level of education, you're locked in and you can't actually go anywhere? And then you come to the US for some of these students and they realize that, oh, it could be different. So I'm kind of trying to see how that feels like for Cameroon, or at the university, the students you're having now. What is that is standing out that you feel you probably want to follow a little more, understand in depth? Because I think if I did see, it is a qualitative study. I don't know if it's a mixed methods that you're trying to use, but I did see you interview some of these students, and helping, and probably those of us who are in this space and trying to investigate this as well. Are there opportunities for people to kind of shape this research better based on your experience and your preliminary findings? So I guess I'm asking so many things because I'm excited about this. But if you could just tell us a little, or just a preamble of what you're finding that then makes you feel like you want to make this national.
Okay, thank you, Awadu. Yes, when I started off, I'm a faculty member in the University of Buea, and I teach in a new program that was launched, or I'm part of a new program that was launched just 2 years ago. And in one of my classes, I usually use get to know you surveys to get to know my students and take into consideration their own plans, their own beliefs, and and things like that. So I realized that many of the students in my educational leadership classroom did not apply to read educational leadership. And we're just there because, okay, it was the last option that they got and they wanted to go to school. They never wanted to stay at home. So they went ahead with the program. And as time went on, I realized many skipped classes or many just fit in later, or there was one disruptive behavior or the other that they did manifest, and I could there was no direct link that I could establish at that time, but I could associate it to the fact that they were in programs that they did not desire. When I came into the Leaders of Africa Research Methods program, this was what had captured my interest. And like I explained in that program, beyond my educational leadership class, I equally had applied into 3 preferred programs of studies, 3 choices, and I never got admitted into any of them. I was given another choice, and that's where I am today. And so when this came up for my students, I wanted to go into it. When I came into Leaders of Africa, for me, it was just a problem of the University of Buea. And I was interested in that, but my tutors pushed me further and said, no, you are thinking about just the University of Buea. That's too narrow. It's even passive. What if this is a problem that the entire African continent is facing? And I would tell you, I was very reluctant to go. I didn't think that, okay, maybe this is a problem that goes beyond the house. And I said, okay, fine, I'm going to include a few universities. And they say, no, push further. If you're not going to go out of Africa, it must be the entire Cameroon. And in our Discord group, one of the platforms we use for engagement, when this research was opened up, we realized, okay, Ghana was experiencing this, Nigeria was experiencing this, Kenya was experiencing this, and we are projecting to take this research beyond Cameroon in the future. And yes, there is an opportunity for many others to get involved and their experiences to shape the research, because in my scoping study, I realized there was more than just the decisions made by the admission board, because as a student, you have the choice to reject the offer, but yet students accept this offer. And there were so many factors that were influencing their decision. One of it, finances. One of it, they didn't even know what to do. Like you said, Awadu, when at the advanced level, you have been set up into a space. You have probably read history, literature, geography, and you are set up therefore to come to the university and read either history or literature. And then you come and you realize, you start saying, no, I rather want to do physics. But physics is not open to you because advanced level had already shielded you to one corner. And I was just discussing this with Peter the other day, but if you go to the US, I have my mates who did history, literature, and today they are medical doctors in the US, and you're asking, how is that possible? But these possibilities are not open for us. And so we are really looking into this and thinking, okay, it will branch out into many areas, and it can help us to begin to understand why education is not creating the impact it needs to create in society. It may be inherent issues, the fact that students in the first place are not realizing their dreams, or at least they are not making informed decisions.
Yeah, as a brief addition to Dr. Eda's response to this, when I was a student at the University of Lagos in Nigeria, we used to joke among ourselves that a significant proportion of folks, particularly apologies to those in education, in the Faculty of Education, we used to joke that they are dislocated futures, in the sense that majority of them were never applied to study education. They either applied to study engineering, apply into science department, or into some of these major social science programs. But unfortunately, they didn't get admitted into those programs. And another crisis with that is that a good number of them, they spent an average of between 4 to 5 years at all looking for university admission with no offer. So the opportunity to be admitted into a program was something they were going to embrace, not because they wanted the program, but just because they didn't want to go back home doing nothing, writing another entry, university entry exam without being sure they were going to pass the exams. So at the end of the day, they just get into the university, and a good number of these folks, they join court groups that becomes ministers of the university community because they are disinterested in the courses offered to them. They are disinterested in the future that comes to those courses. And in most cases, no job offer, no personal commitment, no employment motivation. So they are disinterested, dislocated individuals within an organized university community that is meant to be inspirational to set them as thinkers that will help address problems facing the society. The same in societal news, a good number of them. So, so when she brought up this topic, and we're discussing, I say, Dr. Ida, this is a massive problem in Nigeria. And I'm also aware that it's a massive problem elsewhere. So you can imagine that this was only possible for her to do.
Dr. Adebiyi, I think the connectivity is not the best at the moment, but thank you so much for that addition to Dr. Eta's submission. I think we could go on and on with this, but Eta, Dr. Eta, I don't know what I could say, to add on to what you're doing, but you ably articulated what it is that actually, has taken you there. And yeah, we could say everyone is right, from your advisors to, this is a really big issue on the continent. And we could say, yes, you aspire to be, but then how we balance that out in terms of what your abilities are too is another thing, because we use these grades everywhere to get it. But what is the aspiration for the interests of who it is that's going to pursue this for the rest of their lives? That's a very important area we could be, pursuing. And I want to add on, maybe some of the things you also will be adding into your analysis is, I don't know, maybe you already talked about this, but I really would love to understand, to see what it feels like later for people that have gone through these courses, stop about the university, but that they are now professionals elsewhere, took the start, but like, how is it that they're progressing? We would love to understand that. And then, there's like a lot of ways we could think, but it's a very interesting thing, a very interesting area of study that I think is going to inform and, our approach. I do believe there's a lot of talk around our curriculum or the curricula in various areas or various countries now, how we're training people to, to go out there. And so this is a very relevant piece of research. But, I had, more questions, but I want to open this up. I realize, our time has really, moved on. Do we have anyone that wants to say or ask a question or, a comment? Please just speak up and we'll go.
All right, Jorem, can I go?
Sure.
All right. So first, I want to thank the presenters, the panelists, together with the scholars that joined in today. This has been an amazing discussion. Thank you so much for that. So I have two questions. The first quick one is that how do you recruit scholars to the institute?
Yeah, so that one of the key parts of our institute experience as we've been building the institute is that many of us who have been faculty members, we don't see what all the other people in a university are doing. Mainly those who are in admissions office doing student recruitment, forming those relationships. So we've had to learn how to do that. And we do it in a variety of different ways. I think one of the key ways that it happens, and everyone sort of comes to Leaders of Africa hearing about us in very different ways, and we're always curious to know. But one of the ways it happens is through the events, public events that we do. So we do a lot of those public events that are open to the public, not just our scholars, although they have sort of a front row seat. But those events are open to the public, so people get to see what we're doing in that session. The second area that we do is that we create a lot of creative content in areas of research, areas of impact education. So our voice is sort of heard in those spaces. And of course, with social media these days, if you have those relationships on social media, both informal and formal, off of social media as well, then that can be a way in which that you get that exposure and increase the number of folks that apply to your programs. And one of the big challenges that we have seen is that we do have more people applying to our programs than we are able to mentor in the way that we've talked about here, right? We've really talked about this personalized relationship that is there, that is fundamental to our approach. So we have been thinking very creatively about how we design the programs, as well as recruit others that are involved in some of the teaching and learning and mentorship to be able to expand it out to everyone who is qualified and meets that bar, because we want to make sure that that's the case. So that's some of the ways in which we do recruitment. Coming next year, we're going to be working quite a lot with some partners on the African continent, universities and other organizations to help with some of those efforts. We've done some collaborative work with the African Association of Universities, or also known as AAU. They're based in Ghana. And so a lot of those who learn about our programs learn about us through some of those platforms that share about this opportunity with them. And we also hold special sessions that you get to learn about the Institute before applying. So you get to hear what our programs are like, what we do, our approach. So if it works for you and you're interested, then you're able to apply. So we've had to learn a lot of that. We've expanded that over the years as well.
Thank you. So my second and last one, I've heard you expand, and you've given some elaborations here and there about the innovative research and methods and dissemination. I just wondered if you can give us a quick example of the innovation part of the research. For example, I know when you're planning to do a research, there's the conceptualization stage where you want to know what the problem is of what you would like to research. And then the how, the methodology, how are you going to get enough information about the problem, and then maybe conclusion, the outcome, and things like that. So I want us, assuming there's a student here who is thinking of conducting research in an innovative way. Of course, not everybody is going to be in your institute. What is an example of the innovative training that you can offer? Is it how you conceptualize the problem, or the idea, the research idea? Is it how you research it? So a student comes to you or presents an idea, research idea. So how do you help them develop it in a way that is going to be creative and impact community at the same time? Because research without impact in the communities, it's not research in itself. So I just want an example, a quick example, if you may, that tells me that I'm a student, I bring this idea to the classroom, the institute, the space, and then how do you, what part of which part specifically do you address in the training? Is it how to look at the problem, or how to research it for it to be impactful? So I just want to have like a lay person's language.
Ghana, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So thank you so much, Dr. Damaris, for raising that very important question, which actually defines our uniqueness and approach to our program offerings. We do this in three integrated, system-oriented ways. One of the things, the foundation of engagement with the scholars is to look around their communities. Communities broadly defined and specifically delineated. Specifically delineated in the sense that you look around your neighborhood, which could be your construction of your community. You can look around your local government or municipality, depending on how it is called in your environment, or regional system, and you can look around the country. So you look for problems that people consider to be very, very important for them to address in order to move forward. So we encourage them to look for those kinds of problems and ask them, what are the things you want to address about this problem? And how do you think this problem can be addressed? So we use that in engaging their research and their efforts at the Leaders of Africa by asking them, you can problematize this, frame research around this, and use that to produce knowledge that you can take back to your community to address those problems. And this is one thing that has been missing in most parts of the educational offering on the continent, because mostly people, when they want to do research, they look for something, get a certificate, and at the end of the day, the something that I've been doing differently. And one of the students, I think she's from Zimbabwe, if I'm not mistaken, she's currently looking at the mental sanitation tool for people wouldn't have thought about, because she knew that they play a very pivotal role in ensuring some level of sanity and in ensuring that certain objectives of communities are fulfilled. But most of the existing studies have discounted their role in fostering environmental sanity practices in different communities. So she's looking at the ways that they can be enrolled into the process of having a more sanitized environment that will help foster public health gains in Zimbabwe. And she framed a research agenda around this. And that research is very, very participatory and empowering, in the sense that she's working with people at different layers of the community to frame this research agenda, even bringing them into the process of developing questions that will drive the research and bringing them into the choice of the methodology that will inform the conduct of this research. So what we do at the level of instructor is to equip them with tools and policy-oriented research that not only produce products for publication, but that also produces products that they can take back to their local community to address those problems. Now we've been doing that innovatively. It's through the case study of our research that is being conducted by HISIC. One of the major issues which I'm very passionate about, and which has been my one of the major things that I've been doing in the past 1 decade, is the issue of addressing food insecurity continent.
Ghana, I think it's coming out. I think it's cutting out there.
Yeah.
But just to elaborate on what Ghana has said, just jumped out. Just to elaborate on what Ghana said, I'll just mention that the scholar's name is Muchineda, who's in Zimbabwe. He's talking about her environmental impact research a project and also outreach as part of it. But from my perspective, Damaris, just adding to what Ghana has mentioned, we want our scholars to think outside of their we want them to think in terms of their community, but also outside of their community as well, right? So it's a little bit of both, right? So we're thinking about these problems that exist in our immediate surroundings. We're also wondering to ourselves, are others experiencing something similar, right? Is this something that we can bring to scale, right? So we have a research project, we have even a solution that grows out of it. Can we bring it to scale? So one of the key instructional methods that we use is sort of thinking, is this really your scope, right? Because a lot of scholars who are part of the program, the first thing that they say is, I want to study X, Y, and Z in Zimbabwe, or X, Y, and Z in Chiredzi, Zimbabwe, which is like a region of Zimbabwe, right? That's because that's the community in which one is trying to think about, one is trying to impact. But we want you to think in that way, but we're also thinking, okay, well, how do we see this in a more national level, right? And one of the key constraints that a lot of our scholars face is the resource constraint here, which is another part of the instructional process, is how do you leverage community involvement in the process of research, designing solutions and implementing solutions such that you lower the cost of doing it, right? When we think about if an MSU scholar, for example, comes up with a great idea, they're going to do a whole sort of, awareness campaign surrounding it, right? Particularly if there are researchers very much, not connected to the continent, right? They're going to have to do all that work. But what we're trying to do is design the research in a way that's community oriented, and also broadly oriented, such that, when that idea comes out, it's going to be easier to get buy-in, to get adoption to your idea, right? This sort of transparency around research, which we do see coming up in a lot of educational institutions, say in the United States or elsewhere. You do see this conversation going. But, as we know, and I don't think this is controversial to say, there are certain incentives in academia now, in the university life, when it comes to research and mentorship, that don't necessarily allow us the time or the energy or even the recognition for this type of model of doing research that we think is quite effective and impact making.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yep. Any other question or comment? You can just speak up. So,
Yeah.
Paul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Hi.
Yes. Thank you so much for the different presentations from the Institute and from the individuals, even outside, like from different countries. It's been really impressive to be here. I actually got this invitation yesterday through Dr. Damaris because I had a meeting with her and I shared with her some of the projects I'm currently working on. By the way, I'm a PhD student here in MSU. I'm studying soil and crop sciences. So, and I'm from Nigeria, and I have passion for youth education and community development. So early this year, I incorporated an organization back in Nigeria that focus on youth education and community development. And we are primarily looking at, it has to do slightly similar to, the idea that Miss Etta brought about, like in the high schools, in most of us could actually relate, especially if you are from Africa, where you are in a secondary school, in a local community, and yeah, the government is not like doing the big project they're supposed to do, no good structure. The family is not financially good enough to go to like a private school. But then, despite these macro challenges, we see very innocent students still doing well academically. So I believe that some of these guys have an inherent ability that, if when enhanced, could be a great source of innovation for Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah, and an extension to this problem is exactly what has been discussed very extensively during this meeting. Some of these guys, despite this huge effort, studying very hard, they don't get admitted to the program they wish to study. So the problem continues. And in addition to that, most of the youth in Africa, and it's not our fault, I'm from Africa, it's really challenging to volunteer and or to be part of community development projects that really doesn't mean getting money. All people do is, okay, you want to do a project, how much can I get? How does it help me? If money doesn't get involved, they are not interested. So there's this big challenge that a lot of youth in Africa, or let's say in Nigeria, where I come from, at the national level, there is lack of youth involvement in community development. So my organization is coming on board to create a system whereby we go to the grassroots, search for this bright student, and I use the word innocent for this student because just like we've all talked about, they study very hard. Government don't provide the big, structure, the big laboratory, the internet, but they study very hard and have a good grade of, in mathematics, chemistry, and what have you, until they need to go to university and find out that, oh my God, I've done well in mathematics, but I cannot get admitted to engineering program. I mean, it's a lot of challenge. So my organization is looking at bringing these guys, looking to different parts of the country and beyond over time, and bring them together in a system. We call them associates. Then we use the university undergraduates, we call them ambassadors, to kind of work with them on the kind of mentorship program and academic material distribution system and some innovation development system. It's a lot that I cannot talk about just within this very few minutes of talking. But then the idea is still revolve around continental development that this institute is talking about. So I really look forward to joining other meetings where I'll probably be opportune to go into details of what I'm doing. But honestly speaking, I think this is a very good place to be, and I really want to work with the institute in whatever capacity. I'm good at I would say data analysis. I use R, and I'm currently learning Python. So I think I will be useful in some of your program imparting scholars in Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Paul. Just quickly, Jorem, that's just a lovely comment. I see Eda agreed with a lot of the comments that you made about sort of your statement of the problem, and I do as well. Absolutely, it sounds like, this is a common problem, right? That we have, and Eva's actually, so Eva serves as our director of research. One of our key core areas that we're just thinking about in terms of our institutional research and institutional programs is sort of this issue around youth unemployment. And one of the things that we find is that a lot of these youths, particularly graduates, who come out of university, they're underemployed, right? They're not even using the skills that they gained. In fact, we had a scholar in our first cohort, that was their research and impact project, was thinking about how do we deal with and measure and also deal with these graduates who are underemployed, right? So that was his actual focus. That was James Kwesi Korshi from Ghana. And so I think that's a big issue. And I know that Eda and I spoke about that issue just the other day in regards to our research. And when we were saying it's not just about the quality of the education, but it's just that the systematic things that are present, the constraint, the economic and social constraints that are there, right? So I look forward to speaking with you. We all look forward to speaking with you more, Paul, and sort of brainstorming some ideas and some solutions in that area. So thanks for sharing.
Yep, I just wanted to say that is the real spirit of tea time, making such connections as, we talk about what it is people are addressing in different ways. And, it's interesting how the talk is moving. And I just want to take us back. I think it was in the first few slides where you mentioned, that about 33%, these were where the people learned skills, if I remember well. Is it at the university?
In tech. So tech, their tech skills. So like when we think about the tech economy, only 30, as you said, Jorem, only 33% learn it in university settings.
And I know this may be a stretch, to kind of, it looks like when we talk about unemployment, we definitely, okay, not always, but when you look at those that have actually attained some level of college or any of this, really, a big issue. But is there a way, and maybe some of your scholars actually tapping into those that don't make it to college? And, what is the situation you people see there? If somebody, for example, didn't make it to college, I know you're offering probably, I think, postgraduate training majorly. I don't know if there are certificates or any of those. So somebody has, let's say, ordinary level, advanced level, and they need a certain skill probably to, that you people are in position to probably help train using the scholars down. I know, for example, Newton was talking of finance, and his area of research that generated lots of talk, but, solving the issues that there are locally, meaning the trickle down of this information of research, through dissemination and actually applied work with them. Do you see that as somewhere you'll engage with the lower folks, actually not here?
Violet, do you want to talk about that, answer that?
Yes, thank you, Peter. Jorem, that's a very interesting question. Thank you for asking that. And yes, you are right. Currently, we are mainly focused on mid-career level professionals and top level professionals. And that's where we decided to begin with. And yes, and it may sound elitist to somebody who's listening, but we do have long-term goals. And as Peter gave us some of those long-term goals, as one of them being the dream to open up an actual brick and mortar university. And we think that by the time we get to long-term goals such as this, we'll probably have been able to expand our resource network to be able to capture that demographic as well. Because like we said, currently we've been mostly operating autonomously and self-reliantly, especially when it comes to funding. And as we've built the organization, we've gotten to know that it's more important to focus on where our strengths and skill sets are, and then perhaps in the future build on the strengths to then expand out after we have like a solid foundation on our current niche. And we hope that, again, with these technological platforms that we are using, and also knowing that currently almost everybody, I don't have the statistics off my head right now, but most youth do have mobile phones, smartphones, and most of the people who access our resources online access it using their smartphones. So we hope that even before we get to probably brick and mortar actual schools, we hope that even through the technological platforms that we use, we hope that we'll still be able to capture this target demographic, but with time. So for now, yes, we are focused on mostly mid to top career level professionals, but with time we do hope to expand, as Peter was showing in his presentation at the beginning, that the educational trajectory, of course, begins from the primary to the secondary level going upward. So we will hopefully have that trickle down effect eventually. So thank you, Jorem.
Yeah. And just building on what you said, Violet, like mid-career professionals mean something different in very different contexts, right? So if I use that term in the US context, you have a certain thing that comes to mind. But one of the things that we do see, we sort of see a diversity amongst those who participate in our program, some who are employed, some who are not employed, or some that are research assistants if we've done research in the field. And we know that for a lot of those folks that are collaborating, quote unquote, collaborating with researchers, that those folks have a lot of great research skills, a lot of passion to bring about development, but they come in and off of projects, right? The researcher comes in, they do a project, they're employed, they get an income, then they sit around, they wait for that project to come. That is not a sustainable approach of engagement for those young people, right? So when we're thinking about mid-career professionals, emphasis on the fact that they are professionals, they have the skills and they're ready to sort of be engaged in that part. But we want to make sure that everyone's sort of finding that sort of consistent ability to contribute. And so, as Violet, you said, we started as that entry point, because another sort of key feature of Leaders of Africa Institute is that at the very beginning of the time here in 2019, we were using Zoom to do our educational classes, right? Before the pandemic, before people said, oh, this e-learning thing may be really interesting. And so we already know that there were some accessibility constraints. But the good news is, through our advocacy in e-learning platforms and sort of the discussion surrounding the pandemic of expanding these opportunities, that has opened up a world of a broader form of accessibility. Not to say it's incredibly accessible, right? We don't want to overblow that, but it has certainly gone on the radar of a lot of governments where they're saying, we need to provide the infrastructure to connect people from across different areas of the country and the continent. We need to provide the infrastructure to universities to leverage technical capacity, right? So our mission is also tracking a little bit the infrastructural development. And we're very much on the forefront of having those conversations with policymakers about how do we make these type of opportunities accessible that don't cost the thousands of dollars to take somebody on a plane to move them to Cape Town, University of Cape Town for a meeting, but can have that sort of University of Cape Town experience on a more regular basis in one's own country, right? And so that's also an area that we're seeing, that broader accessibility. And then Violet mentioned it, as we come onto the continent and we create that center of excellence that is there and that emerges into a university, that's when we're able to use these same tools we've used, cross-national engagement, these technical tools, but also have that more physical and presence that is there, that also has that Pan-African experience that we care so much about.
All right. Thank you so much. Any other question from the members? So some of the projects, let's say Dr. Eta, I'm still, she's the one who is doing the national one, the national who has been convinced, which is going to be online anyway. And while probably she's going to reach her population, but her population of interest as well. But this, for the research class, and this could be to Dr. Adebiyi as well, who runs this class and everything, how do your trainees then access money to run some of this research? Because we do see that the funding is really, really minimal from the government, for example. Is it out of pocket? Basically, is it what it is? Because my experience is that is what it was, at least when I was an undergrad, and the skills are different for when you have to go chase for or compete for funding. How is that working?
Thank you so much. I'm so happy that you asked this question because it's something that we really care about the leaders of Africa, given the fact that majority of us, we came from a very humble background. And we have always considered that in all that we do. And one of the ways we've been approaching this is this. Many times, particularly when we see research with a very groundbreaking impact, with the likelihood of groundbreaking impact, we do offer some kind of support. Part of those support is to share funding resources, because sometimes the problem we have on the continent of Africa is dearth of access to information. And a good number of us, we have access to resources that people can leverage. They can write like a 2-page proposal that is very compelling and use that to generate funds that they can use to do their research. So that is one thing that we've been doing differently. And the other thing that is a work in the progress is that we are beginning to set apart a certain amount of money that comes into the purse of the Institute to support some of our scholars that want to do research. And this is because of the leaders of Africa. It's about impact. It's not about money. And we realize that these scholars are committing a lot in terms of getting the job done. And they really want to make impact in their various community. And that's why we've elected to set apart a certain amount of our resources to support those of them that want to do research. And this is going to be a game changer that we believe is going to compel other people to think along the same line. And thirdly, we are beginning to think of potential partnerships with some of the international development organizations in different parts of African countries. And we have a lot of them that are working in different interfaces. We have those that are working in the area of agriculture. We have those that are working in civil advocacy spaces. And sometimes they have the resources, the financial resources, but they don't have the research skill to use data to inform the problems that they are responding to. So we've been trying to build this coalition network of resources that we can link those who want to do research at the Leaders of Africa Institute with some of these organizations and then we work out a kind of a win-win situation whereby our scholars are able to do the research and at the same time accommodate some of the questions that are of interest to some of these organizations in their research, so that they can leverage the funding available within those institutions to do their research. And it's something that if we're able to do very effectively, may be something that other African countries or similar institutions on the continent will begin to look towards annexing as well as a way of supporting their scholars to fund research. These are some of the innovative things in the work that we've been thinking about and that we are going to be rolling out, hopefully, when we admit the next cohort into the Leaders of African Institute. Hopefully, Peter, we have one or two things to say about this.
Yeah, that's obviously something that's really important to us is the resource constraints, because I mean, one of the key things is software wise. So that's one of the areas that we provide scholars with sort of the access to the software. And we also design solutions in-house for access to certain platforms. So we can develop our own platforms for things like survey platforms and things like that. We code. So if you see our website, if you see our platforms, if you see our Moodle, our learning systems, that's all been designed by us and those associated with our core team. We do all of that in-house. So we have a lot of technical expertise to kind of to bridge some of those technical gaps alongside some of the more physical, like the travel, the amount of money it takes to travel to a site and all those things, which we need to, which is important to cover. I think another thing that we do see is that one of the things that we discount is the networks that a lot of our scholars have in their home country. So, you know, a lot of international researchers, let's just say for me, for example, right? I have to travel, I have to be on the ground, I have to form those networks while I'm getting my PhD, doing my graduate work, because I didn't grow up in Ghana, for example, right? But our scholar who's from Ghana, for example, has a diverse set of networks to think about leveraging for this. And some of those networks, you know, are not very expensive to access, right? For EDA, for example, when we're thinking about getting a survey on a national level for students, we know that students are in a lot of different WhatsApp groups, a lot of different Facebook sort of groups and interactions, and we know the spaces where they travel, as well as colleagues. So by using Leaders of Africa's sort of visibility as an institute, we're able to promote that research in those spaces in a way that's not going to be significant amount of money. Now, for the participants who are going to be participating in EDA's research, they're going to get small amount of compensation. So there'll be a raffle, for example, to boost the number of participants. Of course, balancing with ethical considerations, right? So we are, at the Institute, we put a big emphasis on like doing research, but doing research and impact in an ethical way. That's a huge set of conversations we had at the very beginning of our program, and we keep bringing it up. So these are some of the ways that we've thought about doing research in sort of resource constrained environments. Because again, it's very important that us as an institution model how that's done, because all of our partners and universities we work with, that's the first thing that they say. We have these challenges around, you know, fielding research, doing impact projects. And we say, well, we've got some potential solutions for you. And this is how we've thought about these issues. So for us, it's also an opportunity for us to reflect on how to do that. But you're right, Jorem, this is a big challenge. And it's also as Ghana mentioned, it's a fundamental sort of pillar of our growth plan is that institutional funding that we're cultivating. Yes.
Okay. So if there is no other question, yes, I was going to add on, you know, something related, and which is a challenge to most of the scholars or researchers in Africa. It's publication. So this research is going on. What is the experience of some of your students? And you know, probably if there's a long-term solution to that as well. I mean, we see, courtesy of the funding, South Africa, if you really look at the statistics well, they publish, especially for me, you know, in the area I am, I know they are doing so well. But, you know, I would say, yes, South Africa, that area, you know, West Africa, they really, however meager the contribution is, somehow they've managed to beat and are publishing, which is not the same. We've talked of North America, North Africa a little bit here, but it is a real struggle to get, you know, manuscripts published. And what is it the same experience with your students, and how are you helping mitigate this?
Ghana, you're taking our research questions.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Over to you.
But these very intelligent questions. It's as if you understand some of our major concerns at the Leaders of African Institute. We understood these issues for many reasons. Our extensive connection with universities in Africa, and the fact that majority of our core members are the Leaders of Africa. They went through universities in Africa, and a good number of our colleagues are professors, are faculty members, and they have a lot of challenges, tremendous challenges. Publish, it's not that they don't publish. They publish in many of these journals that have been blacklisted, journals that in most cases only have one edition, and after that, they go underground. And there are many reasons for this. One of these is our research method is taught in most of our universities back at home. And when you want to publish in high impact journals, they pay attention to some issues, including your research design. If your research design is faulty, then chances are that you are not going to get published in high impact journals, because the research design is the foundation of everything we do in research. And it's one of the things that people look at from in high impact journals. What is the design? Was the design rigorous? Because the design would determine the quality of your findings and how robust they are. So, and one of the ways we've been addressing that is to focus more on research design in our research methods program. In fact, when all the 3 courses that we teach in the research method program, a recurring decimal is this issue of research design. So we pay a lot of attention, make our scholars understand the heart and science of research design, and ensure that their research is funded on a very strong and robust research design. So in that way, they've been able to cross one of the hurdles to publishing in high impact journals. There are finished this. It's also about the methods of analysis, the methods you are bringing to bear to analyze your data. Sometimes you have very good data, but if your method of analysis is not in sync with your research design, which of course is an integral element of the research design, but sometimes people, they want to do some level of analysis, but because they've not been exposed to that education that teaches them those A to Z of those kinds of rigorous method of analysis, how they can bring their conceptual framework to inform their research design, bring that back into the process of data collection, data analysis, and interpretation of their findings, and the relevantization of their findings to input policy implications to their research findings. So we teach all of those through a rigorous process that makes them aware that this is the way it is done and you can do it. And at the end of the day, one of the things that we emphasize in all of our class meeting is that a major outcome of being a scholar at the Leaders of Africa Research Institute Methods Program is for you to get published. And we are very clear about expectation about where we want them to get published. High impact journals, not just high impact journals. High impact journals that also give local and continental feasibility to the relevance of their research. Because one of the biggest problems anybody is going to make on the continent of Africa is to focus on publication in high impact journals. Because at the end of the day, it becomes a product within scholarly community that may not translate to addressing local problems. So if when you get published in high impact journals that are not feasible to local communities, to policymakers in Africa, we still stretch for the expectation for publication, that how, by training them in terms of how they can make their research to have locally relevant policy implication. And in this area, we focus more on the issue of translating their publication into locally accessible publication that ordinary people can pick up, read, and use to address the problem. When I go around, speak to farmers in the US, farmers could pick up academic publication and use those to address some of the problems of rural agricultural productivity. When you go to Africa, you hardly can find a farmer, particularly the generation of our own parents, who can pick up an academic publication, look at it, and decipher the relevance of that to addressing their local problems. At the Leaders of Africa, we've gotten to that level of duties whereby those that produce that kind of publications in high impact journals are able to render it into vernaculars, local language that farmers can understand can use, can understand and apply that knowledge to solve that problem. So in that way, we've been able to bridge this issue of publication for impact journals and publication for local relevant usages.
And again, we're having those conversations outwardly and openly, because Jorem, a lot of folks that we talk to, they say, we all know this is going on, like this issue about, you know, where our publications are going and what types of journals, but no one's outwardly having a conversation about those frustrations, strategizing about those issues. We kind of break the glass in a sense, right? In our setting and the environment we create, we say, you know, we want to have these open and direct and frank conversations about this. So we talk about different journals, how we assess them, how we access them. We talk about the strategies that are there. And I think Ghana put it brilliantly there, but I want to emphasize just one thing that Ghana said at the end, which, as much as today we've talked about research, you know, coming back to our mission, right? You know, Leaders of Africa mobilizes the power of rigorous inquiry, and we're talking about that inquiry component, and creative expression to advance equity, justice, and leadership in Africa. We do so, and it goes on to talk about impactful and translatable research, right? And that uses audiovisual, graphic, and technological design, right? And that's our acknowledgement that even us as researchers who may not come from a tech, audio-visual, community engagement, outright reach background, and I know some of our fields do. I think, Jorem, your field does a lot more than my field does in some corners, right? We're all in sort of different fields, different disciplinary backgrounds. But here at the Leaders of Africa Institute, we say, regardless of your background, regardless of your general methodological approach, we want you to think about how that translates to the broader impact, right? And I think this is critical, not only in African countries, but globally, is sort of breaking this barrier between the researcher and those who are gaining knowledge and sharing knowledge and those who can benefit. And a lot of our problems we face are those when they listen to us as researchers or knowledgeable people speak, they have their skepticism of what we say. Not necessarily a skepticism that comes from a knowledge of methodology of whatever we did or domain knowledge, but just a skepticism of that this person is sort of telling me and they have all this knowledge and, you know, where did they get that knowledge? Who funded them? All these questions that we face in a day in and day out basis. That shows a fundamental distrust in whatever we're doing to some degree. And so at the end of the day, what we're teaching those at the Institute to do is to build that trust, to break those barriers such that when that research comes, people feel a part of it. They understood where it came from. They understand how it could be impactful, right? And it's also part of our ethical codes that the research that we produce benefit the communities that participate in the research the most, right? That is one of our fundamental principles. So that is really how we intersect between, you know, the research that we're doing and then the impact that comes out there and sort of more of our philosophical elements that underlie everything we do. But I think Ghana spoke to that brilliantly, and I just wanted to add that additional component.
All right. Thank you so much. You guys have been so awesome. But before we close, two really able ladies who I know, you know, they contributed, and, you know, lots of people will watch this eventually. How will you inspire? What will you tell the young woman or the lady who is in mid-career there, you know, like, what would you tell her? How did you get to this position? All of you are associate directors and, you know, have everything going. Tell someone how in a minute each.
I mean, it's stemming from the aspiration to also impact, like it's a way of also paying for it and also helping grooming and also recruiting young people, as you said, to get into this position of also making their voice heard. So that is something that led to this aspiration to be part of this initiative.
Thank you, Jorem. Thank you, Eva. And like Eva said, it's all about aspirations. So to a young lady who is watching or who will watch in the future, I'll just say that find what it is that drives you and then figure out where the people are who are like-minded and then plug into that network and see how you can feed off each other and see how you can grow within that place. And also not to be afraid of starting things simply because no one has done it before or because there's so many things that make you think or that tell you that you can't do it. because with time, the dream becomes brighter as it grows. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You guys have said something, listening to you, I just can't help it but say there is quite a lot you are carrying with the vision. And, I just can't wait to, have this talk again a year, 2 down the road, because you guys are really looking at the future and helping deal with, situations that are really pressing on the continent for generations to come. So really, really impressed with the progress. And again, thank you so much for the time. I know we are about 7 minutes over, our allotted time. But I want to wish us a good evening, and to those who are, I don't know whether it's morning, for example, in Cameroon. I see people, I think we still have Ghana and, Ivory Coast. Thank you so much for hanging in there. Thank you so much for all the sacrifice. And, a happy rest of the week. It's a Friday tomorrow. And so, thank you so much. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.